Okay, this is lesson 112, quadratic inequalities that are less than 0. So just a quick review. In the previous lessons, we did inequalities that are greater than 0. And with that greater than sign, that means if it's greater than 0, it's a positive number. So if you're multiplying two numbers, A and B, the way that you can get a positive outcome is either having a positive times a positive or a negative times a negative. So after you find the solution, you get a solution that's x is less than -2 or x is greater than 3. So today we're going to do problems that involve less than 0. So if it's less than 0, it means that it's going to be a negative number. So looking at two numbers, in order to get a negative product, you'll multiply either a positive times a negative or a negative times a positive. So we have to do both of those cases to solve the problem. So let's go ahead and get started. We'll start with x plus 2 and x minus 3, and we'll start with the top possibility, which is a positive and a negative. So if we make x plus 2 positive, it just stays the same. We make x minus 3 negative, we just surround it with a negative sign, put them both less than 0, and then we begin to solve. So when we add, or when we subtract 2 from both sides, we get x is less than -2. And then on the other one, we need to distribute. So when we distribute, we get -x plus 3 is less than 0. We need to continue solving. We'll subtract 3 from both sides. So we get -x is less than -3. And then the last step, we need to divide both sides by -1. Remember, when you divide by a negative number, you have to switch your inequality. So we get x is greater than 3. Remember, we switched the sign from less than to greater than because we divided by a negative number. So now we'll go ahead and graph it on a number line. So we'll graph the first one, x is less than -2, and then we'll graph x is greater than 3. And again, when we do this, we're looking for where they overlap. So in this case, there's no overlap, nothing in common. So for positive and negative up here, there's no solution. So we need to move on and try the other way. So we figured out positive and negative has no solution. Now we're going to go up and do negative and positive. So we'll write our problems out again, and we'll put a negative and positive. With a positive x minus 3, we just get x minus 3 is less than 0. We'll put a negative in front of that x plus 2, distribute it, you get -x minus 2 is less than 0. Then we'll add 2 to both sides, and then that last step, remember, if you're dividing by a negative, then you have to switch that sign. So we end up having x is greater than -2. Let's come over here and we'll solve for x minus 3. Add 3 to both sides, you get x is less than 3. Now we're going to go ahead and graph it. So when we graph this, let's start with x is greater than -2, or actually we'll start with x is less than 3. And then we'll graph x is greater than -2. We're looking for the overlap. So the overlap again is where they both have in common. So your graph is going to be an open circle at -2, an open circle at 3, and then filled in the middle. And our solution is x is, when we write our solution, we have x in the middle. We know our solution is going to be less than 3. We write this all in one phrase, x is less than 3, and x is also greater than -2. So the solution is all one phrase that looks like this. Okay, let's do another example. Couple of things to note here. It doesn't give you factored form, and it says the domain is integers. So when you're graphing, you need to graph it as integers. So the first thing we'll do is we'll try and factor this out. Again, we're looking for two numbers that multiply to give us -8 and two numbers that add to give us 2. So here are the possibilities that multiply to give us 8. And again, we need a positive and a negative. So when we're looking at this, if we add 8 and subtract 1, that's not going to work. It's not going to give us 2. If we add 1 and subtract 8, doesn't work. If we add 2 and subtract 4, doesn't work. But if we add 4 and subtract 2, there's our solution. So when we factor it, we get x plus 4, x minus 2 is less than 0. And then we need to figure out what we're going to do with this. The whole thing is less than 0. That means this product, it has to be a negative. So that means we're either multiplying a negative times a positive or a positive times a negative. So let's start first. We'll do positive times negative. So we'll do x plus 4 is less than 0, and then negative x minus 2 is less than 0. We'll go ahead and subtract 4 from both sides to distribute that negative. Negative x plus 2. Subtract 2 from both sides. Again, we're going to divide by a -1. So when we divide by a -1, we flip the sign. So x is greater than 2. Now we'll go ahead and graph it. And we are looking for x is less than -4 and x is greater than 2. So when we graph that, and actually that's a mistake because we're doing integers, it should be like that. And then when we graph x is greater than 2, again, should be integers going this way. But again, it doesn't really matter because there's nothing in common. There's no overlap, so no solution for positive, negative. Now we're going to move on to negative, positive. So when we do negative, positive, negative x plus 4 is less than 0 and x minus 2 is less than 0. Distribute that negative sign. Negative x minus 4 is less than 0. X is less than 2 because we add 2 to both sides. We'll finish over here. We're going to add 4 to both sides, divide by -1 and switch the sign. Then we'll go ahead and graph. So we graph, and remember we're using integers. So using integers, if x is greater than -4, so it should be a negative, and x is greater than -4, we're going to go that way. If x is less than -2, we're going that way. We're looking for the overlap. The overlap is there. And since it's kind of a funny looking graph, we're going to do a new graph. So x is greater than -4, x is less than 2, and here's our new graph. There's the solution. Okay, that is the lesson. Now what I would like you to do is do practice A and B. The solution will be on the next video. So go ahead and do these practice problems, see if you get it right, and then you can check the solution on the next video. Thanks.